Hello and welcome to the third and final phase of my fry screaming exercise program. In this phase, we're going to work on gaining more control over our fry screams, we're going to work on pronunciation, and I also want to discuss some of the other cool effects and things that you can do with the fry screaming technique in order to really help you achieve whatever vocal style you might be going for. But just a quick update, so I've recently upgraded my setup. These things behind me are called Audimute sound absorbing blankets. I actually had 2 of these already that I was using to drape over my vocal booth, and that was all inside of my walk-in closet. And let me tell you, in the middle of a 100-degree Florida summer, it is not fun making videos or doing vocals. I would typically be profusely sweating by the end of it. So I've recently purchased more of these sound dampening blankets. I've got them all up around my office, and it's great. I have so much more space now. I can actually spread my arms apart. Like, look at this. I can go over here. And I can go over here. It's amazing. But let's go ahead and jump right into phase 3. So hopefully by the end of phase 2, you were able to produce the fry screaming distortion. Hopefully you were able to do the projected version of it. If you figured out how to do soft fry, I mean, it's great for developing the motor control and understanding what it's supposed to feel like. But hopefully you've learned to project it and get some of that fry distortion while you are belting. If you feel limited in terms of your pitch range, maybe you can get your highs, or maybe you can only get like your mid-range or somewhere in between, that's okay. Just keep working on the pitch sliding exercise, starting on a fry scream at a range that you can do comfortably, and trying to quickly lower the pitch or raise the pitch. But if that isn't quite working for you, then you can also try taking the whiny, raspy falsetto voice that we worked on in phase 2 and actually trying to slightly change the pitch of that, because there is a little bit of play in terms of the pitch that you can produce with that whiny, raspy falsetto effect. So, for instance, with a mid-ranged fry scream, I would take the whiny, raspy falsetto effect, and I would try to do it at a slightly lower pitch, and then increase my tension and make that same transition to the fry scream, and it would be a lower-pitched fry scream. It wouldn't be as high-pitched, it'd be closer to my mid-range.
Oh! Oh! Wow! 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 Ow! Alligator the bandages!
And it's a little bit more difficult, but you can even do the same thing for your low-pitched fry screams.
Ow! Wow! 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 Yow! I am the root of all evil.
But ultimately, if you haven't quite got your entire pitch range with fry screaming, just spend some time working on it each practice session. It will come with more practice. So something you may have noticed by this point is that it's a lot easier to hold out a fry scream than it is to try to say words with the fry scream. This is something I noticed when I was first learning the fry scream many years ago, and when I am teaching other people to fry scream, typically they can hold out the scream and produce the distortion pretty well, but once we actually try to start saying words and screaming lyrics, then things tend to fall apart. It's really hard to maintain the distortion as you are rapidly opening and closing your mouth and slightly changing your throat positioning to pronounce the words. Because when we're holding out a fry scream, we can maintain a pretty constant positioning of our throats and our tongue and our mouth, and whatever positioning you may have found that allows you to produce the distortion optimally is the positioning that you're going to prefer. But when you try to pronounce words, then it's kind of pulling you out of that positioning, and it can make the distortion kind of fall apart and makes it hard to maintain a constant distortion throughout each word. So we're going to work on screaming vowel sounds with varying positions of our throats and our mouth. We're going to work on A, I, O, and U. We're going to skip E for right now because it's a little bit trickier, and I'm going to touch on that when I talk about pig squeals. So let's start by screaming the A vowel sound, and we're going to use the word way, but we're going to pronounce it like this. Way.
Way. Way. Way.
So essentially just going from a narrow tube-shaped mouth positioning to a more open and wide mouth positioning, and then back down into the narrow tube shape. When you do this, just make sure that you are slightly extending your head as you open your mouth more. For the I vowel sound, we're going to use the word Y, pronounced like this. Why?
Way. Way. Way.
And for the O vowel sound, we're going to scream the word whoa. Whoa!
Wow! Wow! Wow!
And for the U vowel sound, we're going to scream the word woo. Woo!
Wow! Wow!
For the U vowel sound, we're pretty much staying in that narrow tube shape. But for A, I, and O, we really want to work on being able to maintain the distortion while saying those vowel sounds with slight variations of our mouth and our throat positioning, because you can apply that to different words. Also, practice your vowel sounds at different pitches. You might feel like you can do this super easily with like your mids or your highs, but lows are a little bit more tricky, so try them at different pitch ranges. And now for the consonant sounds. So there's something that I want you to realize about how fry screaming vocalists tend to pronounce their consonant sounds. I'm going to scream a bunch of different examples of lyrics from different fry screaming vocalists, and I want you to try to notice what each one of these examples has in common when it comes to the pronunciation.
We are the murderers you seek, but you don't have human chemistry. Control your needs, love is great. Blood won't concede. Think about the sentence that you face. Think before you bleed. We follow routine, who plans to the sin, but it's power they seek. I cannot believe these pages words would bend so easily. Only us in the tempo of the sky. A darkened process lose my head, avoiding my all-seeing eye. Try to focus, but the power floods your mind. And the ancient teacher's voice steps him back to current time. Survey them from the looks and bleed them dry. Then you act upset, and honestly I'm not surprised. I say through the demon's eyes, and I know there's no soul in you, so to the lions you go. I can see what is behind this fallacy. Open your eyes and you'll be able to see it too. I feel like I don't belong here in a world of mindless slaves. Copies of interest societals marching towards their graves.
So hopefully you were able to notice that I was pronouncing those consonant sounds very quickly. I was using rapid and mechanical movements of my jaw, my lips, and my tongue in order to pronounce those consonant sounds as quickly as possible. Coming right out of a syllable where you're screaming a vowel sound, hitting those consonant sounds really quickly, and then jumping right into the next syllable where you scream the next vowel sound. And this is a really common pronunciation pattern that most fry screaming vocalists use. I call this harsh pronunciation because you're really trying to attack each consonant sound. Because once again, we can only fry scream vowel sounds. And to produce a vowel sound, your mouth has to be open. To produce a consonant sound, your mouth has to be closed. And I don't know if you've tried this, but fry screaming with your mouth closed is not easy. It's a lot harder than fry screaming with your mouth open. happen. So lingering on each one of those consonant sounds is harder to maintain the distortion and keep it going. So jumping right out of a consonant sound and like bursting right into the next vowel sound is optimal, and it's going to help propel you into each syllable. This is why most fry screaming vocalists tend to pronounce their words like this. Contrasting this with how false chord screaming vocalists tend to pronounce their consonant sounds, they tend to linger on each consonant sound just a tiny bit longer, because it's not too difficult to keep your false chords vibrating when your mouth is closed. And so I refer to this as a smoother or fluid pronunciation style, where it kind of sounds like false chord vocalists are dragging the distortion through each consonant sound. They're still pronouncing them quickly, using the rapid and mechanical movements of their mouth and their jaw, but it's not as aggressive as the pronunciation style that fry screaming vocalists tend to use.
Ay, ay, ay. Oh, I'm talking with my false chords. The pronunciation just feels a little bit smoother. I don't have to quickly pronounce my consonant sounds. I can kind of linger on them and be a little bit more smooth with it. Oh, this is why you and I will never see eye to eye. This is why I never dream with closed eyes. Who needs love and I feel so right? Who needs truth when all I want is the eyes?
But as people get better at whatever screaming technique they use, they tend to deviate slightly from these pronunciation patterns, especially vocalists that use fry screams and false chord screams at the same time. They tend to really develop their own unique style for pronouncing words, whether they want to linger on a consonant sound a little bit longer or use the harsh, rapid pronunciation to explode into the next syllable. But generally, for someone who is relatively newer to learning fry screams or false chord screams, I recommend using the associated pronunciation style. So for fry screams, that would be that harsher, more rapid pronunciation of your consonant sounds, because it just kind of helps you keep the distortion going. It kind of propels you into the next syllable, because you'll be spending less time on each consonant sound, and it helps you quickly get right back into that optimal positioning where you can produce the best distortion that you can. So try practicing to some lyrics from other fry screaming vocalists. I have brought over the list that I put in phase 2 of bands with vocalists that primarily fry scream, and I've put that into the description of this video. So check out some of those bands, practice to some of their lyrics, and go line by line. Listen closely to how they're pronouncing their words and try to mimic it, and you'll start to notice that rapid pronunciation of the consonant sounds, rapid and quick movements of your jaw and your lips and your tongue. So it's not too difficult to get in the groove of pronouncing your words like this, but what about screaming words really quickly, where you have to pronounce a lot of syllables in a really short period of time? Well, there's going to be more consonant sounds. And this can make it a lot harder to maintain a good, thick distortion through each syllable. Really good examples of vocalists who use fry screams and pronounce words extremely quickly would be Luke Griffin, who was the vocalist for the band Acrania, and Hunter Madison, who was the vocalist for the band Hunt the Dinosaur. He's now the vocalist for Sorrow Eater. It sounds like these guys also use their false chords too, but I would say that the bulk of their distortion is coming from the fry scream. So one way that I was able to get better at fry screaming words really quickly was to take some lyrics from Luke Griffin of Acrania. There's plenty of examples in their songs where he is just spitting and screaming words so quickly. Taking one of those lines and first just kind of lazily shouting the words using supported airflow, not producing any distortion, but first just working on the jaw movements, making sure I'm pronouncing each one of those consonant sounds very quickly and getting into the swing of using that pronunciation style.
Deconstructing revolutions while they're snarling in the face of revelations is contagious. Deconstructing revolutions while they're snarling in the face of revelations, it's contagious.
And once I have that locked in, I would start adding a little bit of distortion to certain syllables where I felt comfortable adding the distortion to.
Deconstructing revolutions while they're snarling in the face of revelations, it's contagious. Deconstructing revelations while they're snarling in the face of revelations, it's contagious.
And then I would start adding the distortion to more syllables until eventually I'm producing the fry screaming distortion for each syllable.
Deconstructing revelations while they're snarling in the face of revelations, it's contagious. Deconstructing revolutions while they're snarling in the face of revelations, it's contagious. Deconstructing revolutions while they're snarling in the face of revelations, it's contagious. Deconstructing revolutions while they're snarling in the face of revelations, it's contagious. Deconstructing revolutions while they're snarling in the face of revelations, it's contagious.
And so by this point, it would feel as if I am starting the distortion on a syllable, stopping the distortion once I get to a consonant sound, and then trying to quickly start it back up again for the next syllable. But once I am able to produce the distortion on every syllable, then I would try to make it feel as if I am not starting it and stopping it, but trying to maintain the distortion throughout, as if I am just generating a vector of sound that is coming out of my throat and my mouth, and I'm just using my mouth and my jaw and my tongue and my teeth to weave the sound into words.
Deconstructing revolutions while they're snarling in the face of revelations, it's contagious.
So hopefully that is a good analogy to help you understand this pronunciation style and how to use it to help you scream words really quickly. So now I want to talk about some of the really cool effects that you can achieve with the fry screaming technique. And there's 4 that I have in mind. There's probably more that I'm just not considering right now, but I think there's 4 main ones that you're really going to hear most other vocalists do depending on what genre of metal you listen to. And the first one that I want to talk about is pitched fry screams. So generally the metal vocals community refers to pitched screams as when you are singing or belting a note and you're only slightly distorting that note. So there's still this bass note that is shining through, and it allows you to make your screams harmonize more with the instrumentals, but you're not fully distorting it, so there still is a note present in the sound. When using the fry screaming technique to do this, you can get this more emotional vibe to your voice. And this is essentially what we've already been doing to get the fry scream in the first place, using the whiny, raspy effect in our falsetto voice and increasing the tension. But don't increase the tension to the point of where it produces a lot of distortion. Only increase it a tiny bit so that you're producing a hint of distortion in your voice.
Wow! Right about here! Yeah! I can't seem to find a way to break free from all I've ever known. Whoa! Don't try to tell me we are blessed. We used to run with the wolves.
In my opinion, this is a really difficult vocal technique to get good at. And in order for me to even get slightly good at it, I had to practice the whiny, raspy vocal effect a lot and trying to actually hit different notes and kind of sing with it. And then just slightly increasing my tension so that I am transitioning it just a little bit more closer to the fry screaming distortion. So there's that hint of distortion on my voice, but I'm still mostly kind of just singing in that whiny, raspy falsetto voice. So in phase 2, when I talked about getting really good at controlling the amount of tension that you are generating with your laryngeal muscles and with your true chords, well, this is crucial for this technique because it requires you to use a very fine and precise amount of tension. Not so much that you're fully distorting and producing the fry scream, but not so little that you're pretty much just singing with that whiny, raspy effect. Just the right amount so that you're adding a hint of the distortion to your voice and it sounds good. But this is part of the reason why I teach fry screaming this way, because using that whiny, raspy effect in your falsetto voice while projecting your voice and then incrementally increasing the tension until you fully distort and produce a fry scream, well, you should already have experience with doing that. So all you need to do is back off on the tension just a little bit, and it should be a little bit easier to do because it's kind of the same process that we used to get the fry scream in the first place. And this ties into the next vocal effect that you can get with the fry scream, and that is being able to very fluidly switch from clean singing to fry screaming on the fly, just like that. Because singing and fry screaming are both done with the true chords. So when we're singing, our true chords are relatively relaxed, and with fry screaming, we're increasing the tension a little bit. So all we're doing is changing the amount of tension in our true chords, but we're using the same vocal structure. Now, I want to note that it is also possible to do this with false chord screaming. You can switch between clean singing and false chord screaming very quickly. You can use the false chord distortion to add a little bit of grittiness and distortion to a note that you're singing and kind of do like a pitched false chord scream, but it's harder in my opinion because you're trying to switch between using two different parts of your larynx rather than just changing how you're using the same part of your larynx. So if you want to use like a really pretty and clean singing voice and then be able to instantly switch into a scream and then go right back into your pretty singing voice, well, I think that this is the most optimal technique to do it, using fry screams. You can switch from clean singing and then false chord screaming and then back into clean singing, but it becomes a lot harder to hit those clean notes because the switch between using your true chords and then your false chords, which are slightly above, is a really rough and jarring transition. And in my opinion, someone who's been false chord screaming for 13 years, I find it to be more difficult than just switching between using my true chords to sing and then increasing the tension to fry scream and then decreasing the tension to sing. You're using the same vocal structure just differently versus using two different vocal structures entirely. And then just on a side note, using your false chords to add a hint of grittiness and distortion to your singing voice, almost kind of doing like a pitched false chord scream, switching between that and clean singing is way easier than switching between clean singing and full power, full distortion false chord screaming. That transition becomes really difficult to go from using your false chords and then back into trying to hit perfect clean notes with your true chords. It's really jarring. So what a lot of metalcore vocalists do who sing really well is they add a hint of grittiness to their singing voice using their false chords. They might do some pitched fry screams to get that more emotional effect, but whenever they're full power screaming and fully distorting it, they're almost always using the fry scream to do that. Because once again, the transition between screaming and singing is not as jarring. You're just changing how you use your true chords. And then the next vocal effect that we can do with the fry scream is pig squeals. Fry screams are really good for pig squeals. You can kind of do pig squeals with your false chords and even with your arytenoid cartilage, but to really get that distinct squealing effect, the fry scream allows you to do that the best.
Thieves! Mystery as the answers. Mystery as the rich. Getting your toy is to be let it close. Getting your toy. Do your money in the fire. Get in line. Breathe. 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 Breathe.
And that's just that E vowel sound. One way to think about it is to go back to the open versus closed E exercise that we were doing in phase 1. The pig squeal is essentially fry screaming, but trying to use that tighter and more closed off E positioning where you're really trying to exaggerate the E vowel sound. And it definitely helps to take your tongue and flip it back like this and almost try to squish it with your mouth. And then I think it's pretty well known that trying to scream the word brie while using that positioning definitely helps set you up for it and makes it just a little bit easier to do. And then the last really cool vocal effect that you can get with the fry scream is using the tunnel throat positioning to let you produce that really distinct snarling dinosaur zombie sound, which is what pretty much every modern deathcore vocalist is doing these days. All you need to do is take your tongue, bring it up, and slope it downward so the tip of your tongue is behind your bottom teeth like this. And then bringing your lips around your tongue so that your tongue is enclosed by your mouth. And then just fry screaming and imagining that you're trying to project the sound and make it go underneath your tongue and outward. Now, with pretty much every vocal technique, we want to use vocal projection and imagine that we're trying to make the sound waves resonate and go up and over. But this is the one vocal technique where it might actually be more helpful to imagine that you're trying to project the sound and make it go down and under your tongue. And so that is it for phase 3. I hope this exercise program was useful and helped you figure out the fry screaming distortion and develop the skills that are needed to really take it and run with it and be able to develop a fry scream that sounds really good and to do it at a high level of skill. I hope this exercise program gave you a foundation that you can use as the basis for your practice going forward in order to reach your goals as a vocalist. But if you like the way I teach metal vocals and you want to support my channel, well,
please leave a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe to Scream Theory. I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.